Far from the warmth of our blue horizon, a traveler from another star slips into the inner system with a calm that unnerves. Astronomers call it Three-Eye Atlas, only the third confirmed interstellar visitor we have ever tracked. Its path is hyperbolic, a one-way glide through our neighborhood and back into the dark, unbound to our sun. What raises the hair at the back of the neck is not just where it came from, but where it is going. It is threading an arc that brings it near the red planet, close enough to electrify the imagination, distant enough to quiet alarm. You can feel it already, the suggestion of a meeting in plain sight, arranged by gravity and time. Weeks before that approach, a quiet announcement from Jezero Crater stirred an old hope. Inside a Martian mudstone, mottled patterns, leopard-spotted textures shaped by minerals like vivianite and greigite, hinted at processes that on Earth often accompany life. No trumpet, no proclamation, just the careful phrase that keeps scientists awake. A strong biosignature candidate. The sentence was modest, the implications vast. It suggested a world that once breathed, a shoreline where chemistry lingered long enough to practice being alive. While that thought was still rippling through labs, telescopes began tracking an interstellar comet whose halo glowed rich in carbon dioxide, a gas that rules the Martian sky. The timing felt like a chord struck cleanly in a silent room. We do not claim intention. Physics can look like poetry when viewed from the right angle. Yet the coincidence bends the mind. Most comets near the sun exhale water vapor. This one seems to prefer carbon dioxide at ratios that are anything but ordinary. Carbon dioxide helped warm ancient Mars, letting rivers wander and deltas grow like careful handwriting across a page of sediment. If a world that used to breathe were to be nudged toward thicker air, carbon dioxide would belong on any short list. Nothing here declares design. Everything here invites attention. Consider the alignment. A visitor we can prove did not form here. A planet that has just yielded its strongest hints of ancient habitability. An approach distance close enough to tempt imagination, far enough to settle nerves. And a window when Earth will be effectively blind, handing the stage to the orbiters circling Mars. It feels like a trailer for a documentary the cosmos is about to release. A cut to black, a title card, a single question that will not let you sleep. Why Mars? What exactly are we watching for? Not spectacle, but measurements. Spectra that describe gases in the tail and halo. Jets that reveal where heat finds seams in ancient ice. Shifts in chemical ratios as sunlight drills deeper into layers laid down in another star's nursery. If chemistry changes near Mars in ways that do not map to ordinary heating, we will ask harder questions. If it behaves like a natural comet with unusual composition, that answer will still be wondrous. Either result enlarges us. Either result tells us how worlds share materials and how time arranges encounters that feel like messages even when they are only meetings. The unease you feel, the small tightness behind the sternum, comes from two forces pulling at once. One is awe, the clean astonishment reserved for rare alignments. The other is uncertainty, the knowledge that for a while we will not be watching with our best eyes. Solar conjunction silences us. In that hush, the mind does what it has always done, searching for meaning in the dark. Our ancestors did it under naked skies. We do it with better instruments and more restraint, but the habit remains, a quiet spark that asks whether coincidence and connection might sometimes share a border. There is humility in the numbers. Closest approach is measured in tens of millions of kilometers. That is far beyond danger, far beyond even the faintest breath that could change a climate. A single object cannot reweave an atmosphere. Yet scale does not cancel significance. A teaspoon of dye will not color an ocean, but it can show the currents. So it is here. 3. Atlas is less a delivery than a demonstration, an experiment the universe is running in full view. Patterns, not payloads, may be the message. To see them, we will need patience and a steady pulse. If the word choose bothers you, let it. No, a comet does not pick a planet, but alignments can feel like invitations. Mars is a world where rivers wrote their names and then fell silent. Carbon dioxide is the voice it still carries, thin and whispering. The object arriving from the deep speaks that language more loudly than most. We will treat that as a conversation worth hearing, without assuming anything about the speaker's intent. Curiosity is not credulity. It is discipline in the presence of wonder. Picture the opening frame, a red horizon, wind combing empty plains, a delta fossilized in light older than mammals. Above that stillness, a faint emerald sheen hints at exotic molecules. Machines in orbit tilt their sensors and wait with inhuman patience. Back on Earth, observatories nod to the sun and close their lids, conceding a few crucial weeks to geometry. This is where our story begins. With patience imposed by orbit and a question held like a compass needle that refuses to settle. Here is the promise for tonight. We will follow evidence and we will indulge wonder, but we will not confuse them. We will show what is measured and what is imagined, and we will mark the line between them so you can rest with the light on in your mind. We will walk through the physics of escape paths and the chemistry of frozen carbon, through the history of Martian water and the psychology that makes coincidences feel heavier than they are. At the end, you will not have certainty. You will have orientation and a calmer appetite for the unknown. If the universe were indifferent to drama, scenes like this would be rarer. Perhaps it is indifferent, and we are the ones who bring the music. Either way, there is music. You can hear it in the count between facts, in the breath you take when you imagine clouds over Mars, in the pause before a plot of data resolves. Stay with that rhythm. Let the tension be gentle. Let the scale steady you. Out there, a messenger from another star is speaking in the only language it knows. Down here, we have the patience to listen. Long before the word Mars was spoken by human tongues, this world moved beneath a thicker sky. It had clouds, rain, and rivers that carved the edges of craters into soft deltas. Now, it is a desert of iron dust and fossil wind. But hidden in that dust are clues, sediments pressed into stone, minerals that could only form where water lingered long enough to remember. When our rovers touched down in Jezero Crater, they rolled into an ancient lake bed, a place where billions of years ago, currents may have carried organic grains from one shore to another. The rocks there are not silent. Their chemistry keeps whispering that this planet once breathed. Perseverance drilled into that story piece by piece. In cores from the Bright Angel region, the rover found subtle color patterns, tiny circles and streaks that look almost biological but belong to mineral logic. Vivianite, a phosphate that blooms blue-green when it meets life on Earth. Greyite, a sulfide that on our planet often grows where microbes once fed on iron. These are not proof. They are suggestions, fingerprints without a hand. Still, each discovery tightens the circle around a possibility that feels older than language. Mars may have been alive. Orbiters confirmed that picture from above. Spectrometers mapped clay deposits, carbonates, and sulfates, tracing shorelines long erased by time. Thermal cameras saw where water once seeped, leaving behind salt veins glinting like scars. Scientists reconstructed an atmosphere that could once hold warmth, driven by carbon dioxide thick enough to cradle rivers. In that ancient air, sunlight would scatter differently. Sky pink, clouds gray-blue, horizons hazed with copper light. If you stood there 3 billion years ago, your boots would sink in wet sand, and a pale sun would shine through mist that smelled faintly of metal and dust. The story is not simply nostalgia. It is evidence that climates are fragile, that planets shift personalities. Mars was once warm enough for lakes and channels, then lost its magnetic field. Solar winds stripped the air molecule by molecule, and temperatures fell. Water retreated underground or froze into stone. What remained was memory, the chemistry of a long exhale. The atmosphere we see today is a trace, mostly carbon dioxide, thin but persistent. The planet still sighs it out each dawn as frost evaporates from its poles. That breath is what links Mars to 3I Atlas. Both speak in the same molecular tongue. When scientists saw the interstellar visitor venting streams of carbon dioxide instead of water vapor, their minds jumped. Could this be coincidence or an echo across light years? The gas that once made Mars warm now burns from a comet older than our sun. Perhaps it is nothing more than shared chemistry, the cosmic preference for simple molecules. Yet the resonance is undeniable. Carbon dioxide marks the boundary between lifeless rock and the potential for weather, between silence and the faint hum of habitability. Think of Mars as a heart that once beat. Its pulse stopped, but traces of rhythm remain. Valleys as arteries, deltas as frozen capillaries, dunes as scar tissue shaped by time. When we look at its landscape, we are not only reading geology, we are reading a medical chart of a world that lived through climate collapse. It teaches by example. Every gust of red dust across its plains is an elegy and a warning, showing us what happens when a planet loses balance between heat and breath. Our probes have become the archaeologists of that loss. Each rover carries instruments designed to read the faint language of ancient water. Perseverance, Curiosity, and the orbiters above act as historians piecing together fragments of a vanished climate. What they find aligns like verses in a poem. Different rhythms, one theme. Mars was not always this cold, this still. It had a beginning that mirrors ours, and perhaps a future that hints at what could become of us if we forget how delicate air can be. Even now, the planet breathes in its own quiet way. Every dawn, sunlight warms the frost caps, releasing thin plumes of carbon dioxide that shimmer into the sky. At dusk, the temperature drops and the air falls still, heavy with dust, as if Mars inhales again. That rhythm, day and night, exhale and inhale, remains one of the few living motions on a dead world. It is almost enough to trick the mind into hearing a heartbeat. For scientists and dreamers alike, this is where fascination becomes devotion. Mars is close enough to feel familiar, distant enough to feel unreachable. Its scars invite empathy. Its silence invites imagination. When 3I Atlas sweeps past, it approaches not just a planet, but a monument to everything that can be lost and perhaps found again. The visitor may not know that, but we do. We see reflection in its trajectory, recognition in its chemistry. Mars becomes more than red rock. It becomes a mirror for resilience, a world that survived its own extinction by keeping traces of breath in stone. As our story moves forward, remember this: Mars is not merely a setting for discovery, it is a witness. Its valleys record epics of warmth and ice. Its dust preserves whispers of water and wind. The idea that it could once have hosted life is both thrilling and sobering. It means the ingredients of life are not unique to us. It also means that life, once begun, can vanish. In that dual truth lies both wonder and humility. If 3I Atlas seems to aim for Mars, perhaps it is drawn not by gravity alone, but by that memory of breath. A resonance between two travelers that have known what it means to lose air. Whether this is physics or poetry, it holds the same lesson. Nothing that breathes is ever entirely gone. The molecules persist. The cycles wait for new warmth. The memory lingers in minerals that catch sunlight and glow faintly in the cold. That faint light is what calls us back, again and again, to the red horizon. If Mars is the echo of something once alive, 3I Atlas is the stranger who carries its own kind of memory. Its orbit tells us immediately that it does not belong here. The path is hyperbolic, open, fleeting, and final. No gravity well in our solar system could have launched it this way. It came from the dark, between the stars, coasting on a velocity written billions of years ago. Even before its light reached us, calculations showed that it would never circle back. It is a message without a return address. When the first observations were logged, astronomers expected another dirty snowball. A lump of ice, rock, and dust shedding a familiar blend of water vapor and organics as it neared the sun. Instead, spectra came back strange. Water, yes, but faint. Carbon dioxide, in contrast, poured out in abundance, nearly 8 parts to every 1 of water. For an object formed in the outer reaches of another system, that is a loud declaration of difference. Some joked that Atlas was allergic to water, a traveler that had traded ice for stone. Others noted how elegantly its composition rhymed with Mars, a world whose sky is almost pure carbon dioxide. The numbers don't lie, but they also don't explain. At its heart, this object seems too dry to be typical, too active to be inert. Its surface brightened unexpectedly as it crossed the orbit of Jupiter, and again as it drifted inward, as if layers of frozen gas were stacked beneath a crust that cracked in stages. Each burst carried spectral fingerprints that were difficult to categorize. Traces of cyanide, dicarbon, fragments of carbon chains. Some instruments hinted at faint green emission lines, a ghostly halo glowing at the edge of visibility. It was the kind of data that keeps scientists awake, the kind that invites imagination to lean over the shoulder of reason. There was no clear sign of anything engineered, no radio pulse, no unnatural acceleration, no geometry that defied physics. Everything followed the script of celestial mechanics. Yet within that predictability, small irregularities teased the eye. Jets vented at odd angles. Brightness flared a little too symmetrically. The mind loves patterns, and so we began to wonder if these asymmetries were a kind of cadence, a rhythm we had not yet learned to read. To most astronomers, the simplest story still fits best. Atlas is natural, but eccentric. Maybe it formed in a region of another system, where carbon dioxide froze before water could. Maybe its home star burned hotter or bluer, sculpting its chemistry. Or perhaps, as some models suggest, this body is ancient beyond comprehension, drifting for eons through interstellar cold until only the most stable molecules, carbon dioxide among them, remain to speak of its origin. Each scenario is both mundane and profound. It says that the cosmos writes endless variations on a limited alphabet, and that every now and then, one of those words drifts close enough for us to read. From a distance, Atlas looks like a modest blur, a nucleus a few hundred meters across, trailed by a faint green tail. But behind that blur lies a wealth of data. Polarimetry maps show grains of dust aligned by electrostatic charge, rotating faster than expected. Photometric curves pulse in irregular intervals, suggesting the nucleus is not round, but elongated, perhaps even tumbling end over end. In the language of the cosmos, that spin is a signature, a personal flourish added to the trajectory. As it glides toward the orbit of Mars, that motion becomes more than numbers. It becomes choreography. The comet's rotation dictates where sunlight hits, how gas vents, how the tail bends and straightens. To watch it evolve night by night is to glimpse a slow dance of heat and chemistry. The idea that this dance should play out near Mars, the planet we already associate with both life and loss, lends the moment an uninvited poignancy. It feels scripted, even though we know it isn't. In laboratories and observatories, teams prepare for the encounter like stage managers setting lights. Orbiters around Mars recalibrate their sensors. Infrared spectrometers wait for a window when the sun will be just low enough to reduce glare. Every measurement is designed to capture a sliver of the visitor's chemistry. We hope to find isotopic ratios that betray where it was born. Ratios of carbon, oxygen, nitrogen that act like the accent of a cosmic traveler. If we can match those accents to known regions of star formation, we will know roughly how far it has come, and perhaps how often such travelers cross our paths unseen. There is something humbling in that pursuit. We are watching a grain of matter that will never return, chasing it with instruments designed by a species that only recently learned to orbit its own planet. Our cameras will record, our computers will translate, but the object itself remains indifferent. It will pass Mars, flare, dim, and vanish back into the dark. The record we keep is our signature, not its. Yet within that asymmetry lies meaning. We observe because observation connects us. If you listen closely, there's a tone under the data, a low hum of curiosity, a vibration that bridges science and awe. Each chart, each image, each column of numbers adds a syllable to a sentence we have been writing since the first telescope was raised. The sentence says, "We notice, therefore we belong." An atlas, in passing, answers with silence that feels almost like acknowledgement. Soon, as it draws nearer to Mars, its tail will lengthen, a faint ribbon of light winding through the red sky. The moment will be brief. For a few weeks, we will have our chance to see a traveler from beyond our system reflected against a planet that once held seas. After that, only dust and data will remain. But in that dust lies the proof that we are not isolated islands of matter. The universe crosses its own oceans, and sometimes, by sheer geometry, it lets us witness the wake of something ancient and free. There is a rhythm to celestial mechanics that feels almost human. Anticipation, pause, arrival, and departure. As 3i Atlas draws close to the orbit of Mars, that rhythm reaches its moment of tension. The geometry is exquisite, almost too neat to believe. The comet will pass within roughly 30 million kilometers of the red planet, far enough to guarantee safety, close enough for instruments to tremble with opportunity. What turns this passage into something nearly cinematic is timing. At the very moment of its closest approach, the Sun will stand directly between Mars and Earth. For a few weeks, our world will be blind. We will not see the meeting in real time. We must watch by proxy, through machines we built and sent ahead, as if we had left our eyes on Mars while our bodies stayed home. This kind of alignment happens regularly, but never with such perfect irony. The object everyone wants to watch chooses a stage hidden from our line of sight. To scientists, this is both frustration and gift. When Earth cannot observe, the spacecraft orbiting Mars become our only witnesses. The European Space Agency's Mars Express and the Trace Gas Orbiter will take over the story, recording spectra, imaging tails, and mapping changes in the thin atmosphere as the visitor sweeps past. It is as if the cosmos had arranged a private conversation between Mars and the interstellar traveler and left us to eavesdrop from afar. In the control rooms, the weeks before conjunction are restless. Engineers test communication links. Teams rehearse data transmission schedules. Every sensor must be calibrated, every error margin predicted. During the blackout, the sun's radio noise will drown out signals between Earth and Mars. Command sequences have to be uploaded in advance. The machines will act alone. There is something moving about that autonomy. When contact fades, the rovers and orbiters will continue their routines, watching a comet from another star slip across their sky without needing us to tell them how. They will be our stand-ins, patient and unsleeping, writing our part in the story while we wait. Astronomers call this period solar conjunction, but for those who love narrative, it feels more like intermission. The stage lights dim, the curtain lowers, and behind it, something happens that no one can see. We can only imagine it. A faint green tail cutting across the Martian dawn, sunlight scattering through dust, the planet's thin air glowing for an instant brighter than it should. Perhaps nothing unusual will occur. Perhaps everything we imagine will turn out to be illusion. But imagination fills the vacuum of distance, and in that way, even the blackout becomes part of the show. There is also comfort in knowing that Mars, not Earth, will have the best view. The planet we have studied so long will, for once, be the observer. Its machines, our machines, will stare into the dark and record whatever passes. In that inversion, the story gains symmetry. We used to send our gaze outward. Now, it looks back at us from another world. The data packets that will trickle home weeks later are more than numbers. They are a record of attention, proof that curiosity can travel faster than presence. The physics remains calm amid all this emotion. 30 million kilometers is not a handshake. Gravity between Mars and the comet is negligible. Their encounter is a crossing of lines, not a collision. The sunlight that ignites Atlas's jets will also bathe Mars in its usual rhythm of day and night. Yet geometry gives meaning where chance gives shape. From certain angles, the comet's tail will appear to brush the red planet, a thread of green drawn across rust. For a moment, light and perspective will conspire to suggest connection. That illusion, no less real for being optical, is what will linger in human memory. For those listening from Earth, there will be stillness. Radio silence is an old ritual in space exploration, one we have learned to respect. It demands patience, the kind of patience that feels like faith. When the sun finally moves aside, signals will return, and with them, the first blurred images of what Mars saw while we could not. Scientists will scan them for anomalies, for glimmers of spectral lines or unusual plumes, for any sign that the visitor changed as it passed. Most likely, they will find what physics predicts: a comet behaving like a comet. Yet the beauty of science is that even ordinary behavior, seen in extraordinary context, becomes revelation. Imagine the first transmission breaking through the noise. A line of data, a faint image, a graph. Then another, then thousands. Slowly, a picture will form of dust scattering sunlight, of carbon dioxide streaming into space, of Mars beneath a sky laced with interstellar material. Each pixel, each number, will be a whisper from a moment we missed. The waiting itself will have become part of the discovery. For viewers back home, this chapter of the story will feel suspended in slow motion. Days will pass with no new frames, no updates, only speculation. People will watch animated simulations online, replaying predicted trajectories as if they were weather maps for another world. Commentators will argue about symbolism, coincidence, and fate. And then, quietly, data will begin to arrive. Not a spectacle, not a headline, but a steady return to knowledge. That is the nature of exploration. Sometimes the most profound encounters happen behind the curtain. The beauty lies not only in what we see, but in our willingness to wait, to trust that silence can still contain signal. Mars will have kept its appointment. The traveler will have passed. And we will have learned again that patience is not absence. It is participation at the speed of light. When the blackout lifts, we will turn our receivers back toward the red planet. The lines of static will fade into the steady rhythm of telemetry, and the data will speak in the language of numbers and time. In that moment, the story will resume, not with thunder or drama, but with quiet understanding. The cosmos rarely announces its meaning aloud. It waits for us to listen carefully enough to notice that meaning was there all along. When astronomers speak of coincidence, they mean geometry, angles, distances, and moments that align without intent. Yet as 3I Atlas drifts through its narrow corridor near Mars, coincidence starts to feel like a word that is trying to hide something larger. The timing is too neat, the chemistry too suggestive. A comet from another system, venting carbon dioxide, brushing past a planet whose ancient air was built from the same molecule, while our instruments watch in silence. The rational mind insists this is nothing more than celestial choreography, the inevitable product of gravity and probability. But the emotional mind, the one that built temples before telescopes, whispers that maybe chance is simply the universe speaking in a language we do not yet understand. For scientists, the task is to stay on the edge of that whisper without falling in. Every data set that arrives from the Mars orbiters is treated with clinical precision. Spectra are compared against control readings, against expected reflections of dust and sunlight. The software subtracts background noise until only the comet's voice remains. And yet, even in that silence, meaning leaks through. The carbon dioxide signature remains unusually pure, undiluted by the water vapor that normally dominates a comet's outgassing. The ratios hold steady, as if this object has preserved a chemical simplicity untouched since its birth. That stability feels like intention, though everyone knows it isn't. Philosophers of science sometimes describe such moments as the collision of two ways of knowing, the mechanical and the narrative. The first explains events by cause and effect. The second connects them through purpose. The mind drifts between them like a pendulum. When the data are dry, we lean on story. When story feels too fragile, we retreat to numbers. And when something like 3I Atlas appears, moving with mathematical precision yet stirring human longing, the two halves meet in rare harmony. That harmony is not proof of anything beyond ourselves, but it is real, and it is powerful. Maybe that's why so many of our myths begin with visitors from the sky. Not because the ancients misunderstood astronomy, but because they understood emotion. They saw patterns in the heavens and recognized the echo of their own need for connection. Every comet was an omen, every alignment a dialogue. In the age of telescopes and radio dishes, we think we've outgrown that reflex. But as we track Atlas past Mars, the old reflex returns, dressed now in the vocabulary of data. We speak of resonance instead of destiny, of coupling instead of calling. The names change. The longing does not. There are, of course, explanations more grounded than myth. Some researchers suggest that Mars and Atlas share similar ratios of carbon isotopes because both formed from interstellar material enriched by the same generation of dying stars. In that sense, their resemblance is familial, not fateful. Cousins scattered across light years, meeting again by chance. Others argue that comets like Atlas may have been the delivery agents for life itself, seeding young planets with organic compounds. If so, perhaps Mars owes part of its ancient warmth to travelers like this one. The connection, then, would not be spiritual, but chemical, a lineage written in frozen gas. Still, there is something poetic in how the facts arrange themselves. Mars, once warm, now cold. Atlas, born cold, now warming as it nears the sun. One exhaling its ancient atmosphere, the other venting its stored breath from the deep. Two rhythms meeting in opposite phases, like instruments tuned to the same note, but played in reverse. The alignment may be accidental, but the symmetry feels deliberate. And that feeling is the spark that keeps humans awake long after the equations are solved. Some observers have noted faint fluctuations in the comet's brightness as it approached Mars. Variations that could be rotational, or perhaps the result of solar wind interacting with dust. Yet when plotted against Mars's orbit, the flares seem to form a loose pattern, as if responding to the planet's position. The correlation is almost certainly coincidence, a product of timing and light. But the thought persists. What if interaction can occur without intention? The magnetospheres, the plasma flows, the faint exchanges of charged particles. These are real physical conversations carried out in the syntax of fields and ions, connection, even in silence. At a deeper level, such coincidences remind us that causality and coincidence are not opposites, they are neighbors. Every event in the universe is the intersection of infinite lines of possibility. From our limited perspective, those intersections look miraculous. The same geometry that allows a planet to catch sunlight at just the right angle to sustain life also allows a comet from another star to brush its orbit for a fleeting moment. The cosmos has always relied on alignment. It's how structure emerges from chaos. Perhaps coincidence is simply the name we give to the parts of structure we have not yet mapped. The wonder of 3i Atlas is that it forces us to hold two truths at once. 1. It is an ordinary body, obeying every law of motion, its behavior predictable and unromantic. 2. It arrived at a time and place that mirrors our questions so perfectly that it feels like a reply. The mind can't help but see dialogue where none was intended. But maybe that impulse, the urge to interpret, to connect, is the very thing that makes us capable of understanding. The universe may be indifferent, yet we are not. We bring meaning with us, like warmth in our breath. So when the data return and the charts unfold, the question is not whether Atlas chose Mars, but whether we did. Whether we chose to pay attention to read the alignment as a form of conversation. Because meaning, like gravity, depends on distance. Too far, and nothing binds. Too close, and perspective collapses. Somewhere between lies, resonance, the space where curiosity and cosmos briefly overlap. As the comet sweeps beyond Mars's orbit and heads outward again, the window of coincidence will close. The dust will thin, the glow will fade, and another silence will settle. But what remains will be more than data. It will be the memory of attention, the proof that we are capable of seeing patterns not to escape reason, but to celebrate it. In the meeting of Atlas and Mars, the cosmos reminded us that even accidents can be beautiful, and that beauty itself is a kind of connection. For all our instruments and equations, there is still a blind spot, an area of the unknown that grows larger the closer we think we are to seeing clearly. 3i Atlas passes through our solar system like a mirror held up to that blindness. Every discovery we make about it only sharpens the outline of what we still do not know. We can plot its path with precision, trace its orbit back to interstellar space, and predict its departure beyond Neptune's cold horizon. But we cannot tell what story it carries, what stellar nursery birthed it, or what histories are frozen inside its crust. Our knowledge, immense as it feels, remains surrounded by mystery, like an island in fog. The blind spot is not ignorance, it is the cost of perspective. We see from one planet, through one language of science, across time that moves too slowly for our brief lives. We build telescopes to stretch our senses, but every lens has limits. Between the data points lies an ocean of assumption. We fill that space with models, with imagination, with educated guesses we call hypotheses. It is a noble process, but also a vulnerable one, because we mistake the map for the territory. We forget that the universe is under no obligation to remain understandable. When scientists speak of uncertainty, they mean it as a measure of precision. To the rest of us, uncertainty feels like vertigo, the disquieting sense that reality might be deeper, stranger, or quieter than our tools can register. Atlas embodies that discomfort. It behaves just enough like a comet to reassure us, and just enough unlike one to keep us awake. Each new observation clarifies one fact and blurs another. It is a reminder that mystery is not the enemy of science, but its companion. Without it, there would be nothing left to measure, nothing left to wonder. In the long pause, while Earth loses sight of Mars, data continues to arrive from the orbiters. Dust density, gas composition, tail morphology, these fill columns and graphs. The numbers are beautiful, but they are also sterile. They show what happened, not why. That question, why, is the oldest riddle of human curiosity, and it lives precisely where our instruments fall silent. To ask why is to lean into the blind spot. It is to accept that beyond every explanation lies another question waiting patiently for light. Every scientific revolution began by admitting that something didn't fit. The orbit of Mercury, the bending of starlight, the faint hiss of microwave background radiation. Each anomaly forced us to rebuild our picture of the universe. Maybe 3-eye Atlas will prove ordinary after all, but it still performs the same service. It reminds us that there is always a remainder, a sliver of the unknown that keeps the conversation between humanity and the cosmos alive. To chase that remainder is to stay human. The blind spot also exists inside us. We want certainty, and when we cannot have it, we invent stories that feel like certainty. Some will say the comet was guided. Others will say it means nothing at all. Both extremes comfort in their own way. One by granting purpose, the other by erasing the need for it. The truth, if such a thing can be said to exist, probably lies somewhere in the middle. The universe may not choose, but it resonates. And resonance is enough to make us feel as if we are being spoken to. Mars itself holds a similar blindness. We know its topography, its mineralogy, even the rhythm of its seasons, yet we do not know what it remembers. Every layer of rock is a memory written in a code we only partly understand. The same could be said of Atlas. Each emission of gas, each flicker of brightness is a word in a language no one has yet translated. We stand between two silences, interpreting one with the other. Perhaps that is what knowledge truly is, a dialogue conducted in echoes. Philosophers once described ignorance as a void to be filled. Modern thinkers see it differently. Ignorance is not a hole. It is a boundary, the curved horizon of what consciousness can contain. Beyond it lies everything we have not yet imagined. 3-eye Atlas is a moving piece of that horizon. As it arcs past Mars and back into interstellar night, it carries our attention with it, stretching that boundary by the simple act of existing where our certainty ends. It doesn't matter whether the comet holds alien molecules or only familiar ice. What matters is that it reminds us to look again, to question again, to remain awake. If there's a lesson in its passing, it may be this. Knowledge is a window, not a wall. The clearer the glass, the more aware we become of the darkness beyond it. Every answer illuminates a smaller circle of truth while revealing how vast the surrounding shadow remains. To live in that balance, between light and unknown, is the human condition. We are creatures built to wonder, and our instruments are only extensions of that original impulse. When the final data from Mars returns, it will be analyzed, debated, and filed into journals. In time, the news cycle will move on. and 3-eye Atlas will fade into the catalog of celestial visitors. But somewhere in that catalog, beneath the columns of numbers, will remain a residue of awe. We will remember the nights spent waiting for signals, the questions that refused to be answered, and the quiet thrill of confronting something that made us feel small in the best possible way. That is the gift of the blind spot. It humbles without defeating, reminding us that every mystery we solve is just the preface to another. The light we chase will always cast a shadow, and in that shadow, curiosity finds its home. Long before telescopes, people looked up and gave names to the lights that moved. They saw stories there, warriors, hunters, lovers, gods, because the sky was too silent to bear without meaning. That ancient habit never left us. Even now, under the hum of electronics and the glow of cities, we still look for our reflection in the stars. Every time a comet appears, we feel something stir, a soft, persistent desire that is older than language. It is not only the urge to understand, but to belong. 3-eye Atlas has become a mirror for that longing. We point instruments at it, but what we are really studying is ourselves. The questions we ask, why now? Why Mars? Are the same questions we ask of life, of love, of mortality. They are disguised in the syntax of science, but fueled by something far more personal. A comet from another star doesn't need our attention, yet we pour hours, money, and hope into watching it. There is devotion hidden in that curiosity, a small confession that knowledge alone is never enough. Desire, in this sense, is not romantic, but existential. It is the pull toward connection, toward meaning that sits just beyond reach. Mars, too, has always embodied that desire. It is the planet we keep projecting ourselves onto. Our fears, our ambitions, our fantasies of escape. We have written poems about its red glow, built spacecraft to touch its surface, and imagined civilizations that could justify our own loneliness. When we watch 3-eye Atlas slide past Mars, it feels like one longing meeting another. A frozen traveler, drawn to a world that once had seas, both haunted by what they've lost. In a way, that meeting condenses the human condition into a single scene. The traveler and the witness, the seeker and the dreamer, each defined by absence. Mars lost its warmth. Atlas lost its home star. We lost our certainty that we are central. And yet, in the space between those losses, something tender emerges. We project emotion onto physics, not because we misunderstand it, but because emotion is how we translate scale. Without it, the universe would be too vast to touch. Every generation rediscovers this longing through new instruments. For the Babylonians, comets were omens. For Renaissance astronomers, they were objects to be measured. For us, they are both. Data points that still hum with mystery. No matter how many charts we draw, a part of us still feels that the sky is alive, that it notices us noticing it. We build probes, but we are really building prayers made of metal and code. We send them outward, hoping that somewhere, something is listening. That hope is the quiet heartbeat beneath every scientific mission. We rarely admit it, but we do not explore only to know. We explore to be known. When our radio signals leave Earth, they carry coordinates, chemistry, music, laughter. They are small declarations of existence flung into the dark. We were here, we wondered. The silence that comes back is not rejection. It is vastness. It gives our message room to echo. In that echo lies the pattern of our desire. the more the universe resists answering, the deeper our curiosity grows. It is the same logic that drives art, love, and prayer. The hunger for resonance where none is guaranteed. 3i Atlas, silent and indifferent, gives us that gift. It doesn't respond, but it lets us listen harder. Each photograph, each calculation is an act of attention, and attention is the purest form of affection we have ever learned. Mars understands that rhythm better than any other planet. For decades, we have sent machines to orbit, land, and listen. Each one carries a human heartbeat disguised as code. When Perseverance drills into ancient rock, or Curiosity climbs a ridge, those are gestures of longing, reaching across time to touch what we can never truly possess. The desire to find life on Mars is not just about biology. It is about continuity, the hope that life somewhere continues. Perhaps that is why the encounter between Mars and Atlas feels intimate. Both are relics of persistence, one that lost its warmth, one that lost its origin. They mirror the human story: survival through motion, memory through change. Watching them align, we sense kinship in their trajectories. Their crossing becomes a metaphor for our own longing, for contact, for meaning, for proof that we are not alone, even when everything around us insists that we are. Desire, of course, has its dangers. It can lead us to see patterns that aren't there, to mistake our reflection for revelation. But it also keeps us alive. It is the force that turns fear into wonder, isolation into exploration. Without it, no one would have built the telescopes that found Atlas, or the spacecraft that watch Mars. Desire pulls us toward the unknown, not to conquer it, but to participate in it, to say, we too are part of this. As 3i Atlas drifts farther from the red planet, it leaves no mark that our sensors can detect. Yet something remains, a pulse, faint but undeniable in the collective imagination. For a brief moment, two distant worlds shared a frame, and in that frame, we saw ourselves reflected. What we call discovery is often just recognition. What we call wonder is simply desire meeting its mirror. Every civilization has imagined itself chosen. It is one of our oldest stories, written in the same ink as fear and hope. Ancient kings traced their power to the heavens. Prophets heard voices in thunder, and philosophers believed reason itself was proof that the cosmos favored humanity. To be chosen was to matter, to be lifted from the anonymity of dust. Yet dust is what we are made of. The same carbon, the same silicates that drift between stars and gather into worlds. When 3i Atlas crossed paths with Mars, that old story stirred again. It was easy, almost automatic, to feel that this encounter was directed at us, that the universe, so wide and silent, had arranged a moment of recognition. But what if that feeling, beautiful as it is simply another myth we tell to soothe the ache of insignificance? Mars has long been the stage for our projections. In the late 19th century, telescopes showed faint lines across its surface. Some observers saw canals, evidence of intelligence. The idea of Martian engineers gripped the public imagination, and suddenly, we were not alone. Later, when those lines proved to be illusions of light and expectation, the disappointment was sharp but instructive. We realized how eager we were to find purpose written into the random. The Martian canals were never carved in stone. They were carved in desire. The same pattern repeats with every discovery. A strange signal in radio data, a flicker in a star's brightness, a comet with an odd composition, all invite the same reflex. It must mean something. Meaning implies choice, and choice implies someone doing the choosing. But nature does not choose. It unfolds. Its patterns are emergent, not ordained. The myth of being chosen is how our minds translate that unfolding into narrative. It turns randomness into relevance, chaos into conversation. It is a coping mechanism disguised as revelation. Still, the myth persists because it feeds a deeper hunger. To be chosen is to be seen, and to be seen is to exist twice, once in reality and once in recognition. Our telescopes are not just tools of observation. They are eyes looking for a gaze to meet our own. When no gaze returns, we invent one. We imagine the cosmos noticing us, whispering back through alignments and coincidences. We read patterns into 3i Atlas's orbit and call them omens, because the alternative, that the universe operates without intention, feels unbearable. Even science, which prides itself on skepticism, carries echoes of this myth. When we search for life, we are also searching for affirmation that we are not accidental. The Drake equation, the search for biosignatures, the seedy antennas sweeping the sky. All these are structured prayers, grounded in data, but driven by hope. They ask not only, is anyone there, but do we matter? It is a profoundly human question, and perhaps that is why we never stop asking it. The myth of being chosen has its shadow side. It can breed arrogance as easily as awe. If we believe we are the favored children of creation, we start to act as though the cosmos is ours to command. We take resources, reshape worlds, and measure success by conquest. Mars itself is already caught in that narrative, mapped, targeted, and claimed for future colonies. The same longing that built observatories also builds empires. The difference is scale, not essence. To believe we are chosen can inspire compassion, but it can also justify dominance. Yet myths endure because they contain a kernel of truth. Perhaps the universe does not choose, but connection still exists. We are made of the same atoms forged in long-dead stars. We are, in a literal sense, the universe noticing itself. In that light, the idea of being chosen is not false. It is simply misplaced. The selection was chemical, not moral. Physical, not personal. The carbon in our cells and the carbon dioxide in Atlas's tail are cousins. The difference is awareness. We can look back and recognize the bond. So maybe the myth needs rewriting. Maybe being chosen does not mean singled out. It means participating. To be chosen is to be conscious enough to witness, to ask questions that stretch the fabric of understanding. The comet does not need to speak for us to hear something. Its silence is the invitation. Our noticing is the answer. In that exchange, choice becomes mutual. The universe offers patterns, and we decide how to interpret them. When we frame 3i Atlas as a message, we reveal less about the comet and more about ourselves. We expose the tender machinery of human meaning-making, the way we reach into the unknown and pull out stories that make us feel less alone. The myth of being chosen is not a flaw. It is an expression of care. It proves that, even in an indifferent cosmos, we are still capable of love. And maybe that is enough. Maybe the purpose of the myth was never to be true, but to keep us looking up. Every generation needs a reason to keep asking questions. The comet passes, Mars continues its orbit, and the universe remains silent. But we are still here, watching, wondering, inventing meaning as a way of breathing. The act itself is sacred. To choose to care, even when we know we are not chosen, is the purest rebellion against the coldness of space. It is tempting to imagine 3A Atlas as an architect, a wandering builder carrying the raw materials of life between worlds. The word terraformer whispers through late-night forums and quiet documentaries, conjuring visions of icy messengers sculpting atmospheres, seeding planets, setting the stage for evolution. The science behind it is thin but tantalizing. We know that comets deliver water and organics, that impacts can alter climates. The thought follows naturally. Maybe some comets do more than visit. Maybe they create. Maybe they choose. But what if 3I Atlas is not a builder at all? What if it is a mirror? Mirrors, too, can transform. They show us what already exists, revealing the contours of our desire and the outline of our ignorance. When we call a comet a terraformer, we are projecting hope outward, a wish that the universe might still be writing new beginnings. When we call it a mirror, we are acknowledging something harder, that the change must come from within, that the landscape we most need to reshape is our own. Still, the image of Atlas as a terraformer is difficult to resist. Its composition aligns with ingredients that could warm a frozen world. Carbon dioxide, carbon chains, the chemical bones of potential atmospheres. If it struck Mars, even lightly, it would release a breath of gas dense enough to thicken the air for a moment, a fragile echo of the planet's past. Simulations show how such impacts might awaken dormant ice, trigger brief rains, carve temporary rivers. The physics are real. The poetry writes itself. The comet becomes a sculptor, the planet its clay, and the scene unfolds like an experiment in cosmic resurrection. Scientists remain cautious. Impacts that could change a world also destroy it. The energies involved are vast, the outcomes unpredictable. Nature rarely performs miracles without consequence. More likely, 3I Atlas will pass quietly, disturbing nothing but light. Its tail will graze sunlight, its gases will disperse, and Mars will continue its slow orbit unaltered. Yet even that inaction carries symbolism. The encounter becomes less about transformation and more about reflection, a moment where a lifeless world and a lifeless visitor recognize each other's solitude. Perhaps that is the deeper resonance. Mars, the planet that lost its air, meets Atlas, the traveler that carries air frozen in its skin. Each contains what the other lacks. The planet holds a memory of warmth. The comet holds the potential for it. Together, they form a tableau of symmetry, a cosmic still life that captures both what was and what could be. It is not an exchange of matter, but of meaning. Mars shows Atlas its future, a descent into stillness. Atlas shows Mars its past, a time when motion carried warmth. Between them, an unspoken understanding. Survival may not mean staying alive, but continuing to be seen. The idea of reflection runs deeper still. Every observation we make of Atlas reflects the state of our own civilization. The instruments, the questions, the interpretations, they all mirror the stage of our development. A medieval sky watcher would have seen an omen. A 20th century astronomer would have seen chemistry. We see context, a pattern among patterns, a data point that folds back into our search for origins. In this way, the comet tells us less about itself and more about how far we've come. The more we understand, the clearer the reflection becomes, and the more humbling. If Mars were a person, this encounter would be a moment of introspection, a world staring into the glass of the cosmos and seeing its own history staring back. It would remember the breath it once took, the lakes that shimmered under a pink sky, the warmth that escaped molecule by molecule. It would feel the ghost of that breath in Atlas's carbon clouds and recognize the same loneliness. Two worlds meeting for the briefest instant, bound not by gravity, but by resemblance. That resemblance extends to us. We too are mirrors of what we study. When we marvel at Mars, we are marveling at the possibility of our own endurance. When we measure a comet's composition, we are measuring how far curiosity has carried us from the caves and fires that first taught us to look up. The act of watching is its own form of creation. To witness connection is to bring it into existence, if only for the span of thought. Some scientists speculate that interstellar comets like 3I Atlas could spread the building blocks of life across galaxies. Fragments shed from their surfaces drift for eons before falling into new star systems, where they become part of planets yet to form. If so, Atlas might indeed be a terraformer, but not in any deliberate sense. Its influence would be statistical, not intentional, the quiet hand of entropy creating opportunity. Life might arise not because it was planned, but because chance is generous when given enough time. In that light, Atlas is both builder and mirror, architect and witness. It shapes by existing, reflects by passing. The distinction between creation and reflection may not matter at all. Both describe interaction, and interaction is what keeps the universe alive. A comet passing a planet stirs dust, bends light, changes the way we see. That is creation enough. The reflection is mutual. Mars illuminates Atlas as much as Atlas illuminates Mars. And we, observing from afar, complete the circuit. The mirror widens until it includes everything: the comet, the planet, the watchers, and the desire that connects them. When Atlas finally recedes into the dark, it will leave behind no blueprint, no terraform. What it leaves is awareness. Mars will continue to turn under its thin veil of air, and we will continue to listen for echoes. Maybe that is the real transformation. The shift from seeking miracles to recognizing meaning in the ordinary. The comet did not build a world, but it built a moment, and that moment changed us. In the end, we may never know whether Atlas was a terraformer or a mirror, or whether those two ideas were ever truly separate. What matters is that we looked, we wondered, and in doing so, we saw ourselves reflected in the light of another world. The universe builds no temples. It builds opportunities for reverence. To see one, you need only a telescope, a question, and the willingness to be still when the answer is silence. Every story about life begins with a question. Where did it come from? We look at Earth, alive, complex, overflowing, and wonder how chemistry learned to breathe. One answer hides in the cold: the theory of panspermia. It suggests that life, or at least its ingredients, may not have started here at all. It could have traveled, frozen, sleeping, drifting across interstellar distances inside comets like 3I Atlas. In this version of the story, life is not a local miracle. It is a cosmic traveler, scattered like pollen through the galaxies, waiting for the right soil to wake again. The thought is as poetic as it is unsettling. If true, it means we are children of the void, our origins not confined to one world, but to the shared chemistry of many. The carbon in our skin, the amino acids in our cells, could be the echoes of experiments conducted in other systems long before the sun was born. Each comet becomes a capsule of potential, carrying fragments of the same ancient script. When Atlas passes by Mars, it is hard not to imagine the scene as repetition, a reenactment of some older delivery, perhaps one that once seeded Mars itself. But panspermia does not require life to have survived the journey. It only asks that memory did. Organic molecules can be remarkably persistent. They cling to ice, to dust, to the crevices of rock. Cosmic radiation can alter them, but not erase them. Over millions of years, those fragments drift and collide, weaving a faint continuity across space. Even if no living cell endures the passage, the message remains. The chemistry of life is universal, and the universe remembers. That word, remembers, changes the story. It shifts the focus from creation to continuity, from birth to inheritance. Maybe 3i Atlas is not a seed, but a record, a frozen archive of what existence has already tried elsewhere. When sunlight strikes its surface and vapor carries molecules into space, those molecules become whispers of old histories. They tell us not how life might begin, but what it has already been through. In that sense, the comet is not a courier, but a library, and every spectrum we record is a page turning in the dark. Scientists have detected simple organics in comets before: methanol, formaldehyde, even amino acids. These are not signs of life, but of readiness, the raw alphabet from which life can write itself. Atlas, with its rich carbon dioxide emissions, might carry similar compounds. If so, they would serve as a kind of time capsule, preserving chemistry from a star that no longer exists. Studying them is like finding a fossil of potential, a trace of what the universe was capable of long before humans were here to name it. The distinction between seed and memory might seem small, but it changes everything about how we see our place in the cosmos. The seed story is forward-looking, full of optimism and expansion. It implies a universe that plants life wherever it can. The memory story is reflective, more elegiac. It suggests a cosmos that keeps records of its own experiments, not to repeat them, but simply to remember. In the seed story, we are inheritors. In the memory story, we are witnesses. Perhaps both are true, and the line between them is as blurred as the tail of a comet in sunlight. There is a tenderness in the idea of cosmic memory. It means that nothing vanishes entirely. Even when worlds die, their chemistry persists, drifting onward in new forms. Maybe Mars once hosted microbes that grew, fossilized, and became dust. Maybe that dust rose into the air, escaped into space, and waited billions of years for a comet like Atlas to carry it somewhere new. The exchange could go both ways. Earth could be another participant in this quiet trade, giving and receiving molecular echoes across time. Existence becomes less a sequence of beginnings and endings, more a rhythm of remembering. When people imagine panspermia, they often picture deliberate intent, an alien civilization sending life out like gardeners planting seeds. But the beauty of the theory is that it needs no gardener. Random motion, impact, and gravity are enough. The universe does not need to mean for life to spread. It only needs to allow it. The act of drifting becomes sacred precisely because it is accidental. Meaning emerges from motion. That, too, is a kind of faith. Perhaps that is why Atlas feels different from any other comet we have seen. Its trajectory reminds us of stories older than our species, stories written in dust and radiation instead of words. As it moves past Mars, the scene feels like a ritual repeated beyond memory, an offering, a remembrance, a handover from one epoch to another. No music, no witness, only motion. Yet in that motion lies everything we define as living: persistence, adaptation, continuity. The question of whether life began here or came from elsewhere may never have an answer we can test. What we can know is that the ingredients of life are not rare. They appear wherever the universe gives them a chance. Carbon binds to oxygen. Nitrogen meets hydrogen. Sunlight does the rest. That process is both mechanical and miraculous. It needs no guiding hand, but it creates the illusion of one because it produces us, the observers, the rememberers, the voices that ask why. As 3i, Atlas retreats back into the deep. It carries with it whatever fragments of story we have added, our measurements, our awe, our hunger to connect. Maybe one day, in another system, another form of life will detect traces of our own departure. The faint radio noise, the residue of rockets, the dust we scatter into orbit. They might wonder, as we do now, whether those fragments were seeds or memories. In that symmetry, the circle closes. For now, we can only watch and imagine. The comet fades, the data streams slow, and Mars turns quietly beneath its thin sky. Yet something lingers, the awareness that even in the absence of life, the universe remembers life's possibility. Each comet, each planet, each fleeting encounter writes a new entry in the great record of what can be. We are part of that archive, reading and adding at once. The ink is made of carbon, the pages are made of time, and the story never truly ends. Every act of looking changes the one who looks. That truth has followed humanity from the first shadow cast on a cave wall to the glow of a monitor tracking an object like 3i Atlas. The universe is not a static backdrop to our questions. It reshapes us with every answer we try to force from it. To study the cosmos is to hold a mirror to the mind itself, and what we see reflected is often our own need for meaning disguised as observation. The story we tell about 3i Atlas is more than data. It is a narrative written by the culture that studies it. One generation calls a comet an omen, another calls it a visitor, another calls it a data set. The object does not change, but the observer does. Our metaphors evolve as our tools evolve, and each metaphor opens a new way of seeing. When we call the comet a messenger, we listen for language. When we call it a machine, we search for design. When we call it natural, we seek order in chaos. These stories are not wrong. They are translations, each revealing what our civilization is capable of believing. In this way, science becomes a form of storytelling, and storytelling becomes a form of science. Both begin with curiosity and end with transformation. We measure light curves and spectral lines, yet what moves us is not the precision, but the wonder those numbers evoke. Wonder is the gravity that keeps us in orbit around the unknown. It draws us back again and again, even when the mystery remains unsolved. Perhaps that is the true function of stories, not to close questions, but to keep them alive long enough for us to grow into better versions of ourselves. The story we tell about Mars has already shaped us. It taught us patience, engineering, humility. The dream of reaching it built industries, inspired generations, and reminded us that distance can be conquered by persistence. Now 3i Atlas enters that story as an unexpected character, not rewriting the plot, but deepening it. Its presence forces us to step back and ask why we care so much about this planet, this visitor, this dance of coincidence. The answer lies in our reflection. We care because we recognize ourselves in both, the wanderer and the witness, the seeker and the stillness. For centuries, our search for knowledge has carried a hidden motive, the hope that somewhere out there, something will answer back. Every telescope built is an instrument of listening as much as seeing. Each signal we send into space carries an unspoken plea, reply. But replies, when they come, are rarely in the form we expect. They come as discoveries that reshape the question. They come as evidence that humility is the only reasonable stance in a universe so immense. They come as the awareness that the search itself is the dialogue. 3i Atlas, in that sense, is both subject and teacher. It reminds us that discovery is not a straight line from ignorance to understanding. It's a spiral. Each turn reveals not only new information, but new parts of ourselves. When we describe the comet as mysterious, we are really describing the edge of our own comprehension. When we marvel at its beauty, we are measuring the capacity of our own emotion. The story is the instrument, and we are the ones being tuned. Every era builds its own myth of knowledge. The Enlightenment told us the world was a puzzle to be solved. The 20th century told us it was a system to be mastered. Our era, perhaps, is learning a gentler lesson, that the universe is a conversation to be sustained. Data is not dominion. Measurement is not control. To know something truly is to listen to it without insisting on an answer. 3i Atlas will pass and vanish, but what remains is the habit of listening, the awareness that silence, too, contains instruction. Somewhere between the mathematics and the metaphors, the story begins to loop back. The observer becomes the observed. As we watch the comet fade into the dark, we realize that we have been watching ourselves. The persistence, the curiosity, the quiet bravery of beings who build meaning out of absence. The universe gives us phenomena. We give them purpose. And in that exchange, both sides are changed. The story shapes the searcher in another way too. It softens us. Awe, properly felt, erodes arrogance. The longer we stare into the depth of space, the harder it becomes to cling to small certainties. The stars teach humility by their very existence. They remind us that perspective is an act of grace, that we can feel infinite insignificance and infinite belonging at the same time. It is a strange paradox. The more we learn, the less we claim to know, and the freer we become. Perhaps that is what 3i Atlas is here to teach, if teaching is the right word. Not knowledge, but posture. Not revelation, but readiness. It shows us the virtue of patience, the necessity of wonder, the power of asking questions that may never be answered. The story we write about it will fade, replaced by others, but the shape it leaves in us will endure, a curve of curiosity bending ever outward. And when it is gone, when the data is archived and the headlines dissolve, we will continue to search, not because we expect to be chosen or rewarded, but because searching is what consciousness does. To exist is to ask. To observe is to confess love for what cannot be possessed. The story will keep unfolding, and in its unfolding, we will keep becoming. Maybe the most unsettling idea is not that 3i Atlas found us, but that we've been calling to it without knowing. For more than a century, humanity has been sending signals, radio pulses, data bursts, fragments of mathematics, whispered confessions into the dark. We tell ourselves it's for science, for curiosity, for communication. But maybe what we're really doing is longing aloud. Every transmission is a flare of loneliness, an attempt to prove that silence isn't the final language of the universe. And now, as this interstellar object sweeps through our solar system, the question arises like a soft echo. Did something, somewhere, finally answer? The rational voice in us insists that's impossible. 3i Atlas follows the laws of motion, not intention. Its trajectory was fixed long before humans existed. The comet is indifferent to our signals, unaware of our telescopes and our hopes. Yet reason doesn't quiet the emotional tremor beneath the question. Because part of us wonders whether physics might sometimes serve as the handwriting of something larger. Something that doesn't choose in the way we understand, but still connects. What if the act of calling, of wondering, of hoping, creates resonance in the very fabric we're trying to measure? We've been broadcasting for decades, sending greetings toward stars that will never receive them in any human lifetime. Voyager carries our music. Pioneer carries our diagrams. Countless observatories beam coordinates of our small blue world into the void. These acts are beautiful, futile, and deeply human. They're not invitations expecting response. They're prayers of persistence. They say, "We were here. We thought about you." And maybe that is enough. Perhaps meaning isn't in the reply. It's in the courage to ask. The notion that we've been calling all along reframes everything. It makes 3i Atlas not a stranger intruding, but an answer of sorts. A coincidence that feels like recognition. Mars, with its ancient riverbeds and frozen sighs, sits at the crossroads of our desire to connect. It's the planet we've tried hardest to reach, the one we've spoken to most often through our machines. Maybe that attention created a kind of gravity, not physical, but symbolic, that drew the story toward itself. The comet passes, and we read it as conversation because we were already listening for one. History offers echoes of this same reflex. When radio astronomers in the 1960s first detected pulsars, they called them LGM, little green men. Because the signals were so precise, they seemed intentional. Later, we learned they were neutron stars, rotating with mathematical perfection. The meaning changed, but the wonder didn't. We wanted the pulse to be someone calling back. Instead, it was nature speaking in its own rhythm. Even that disappointment carried beauty, because it reminded us that existence itself hums with patterns. The line between message and phenomenon is thinner than we think. Maybe what's truly important isn't whether 3i Atlas heard us, but whether we were capable of listening deeply enough to recognize our own voice reflected back. Every scientific instrument, every late-night observation is part of that act of listening. When we point a telescope at the sky, we're not just collecting data. We're tuning the human spirit to the frequency of the cosmos. The hum of machinery becomes a kind of meditation, The static becomes a choir. In that quiet, we begin to hear ourselves differently, not as individuals, but as participants in something vast and unending. Mars has always been a testing ground for that kind of listening. We've aimed more messages toward it than any other world. We've landed machines that sing in code, that hum to us across tens of millions of kilometers. Each one extends the reach of our voice. Each one deepens the silence when contact fades. Perhaps that cycle, call, response, loss, renewal, is what defines the rhythm of discovery. It's less a dialogue with the universe and more a heartbeat of attention. 3i Atlas simply happened to pass through the same tempo, syncing for a brief moment with our pulse. If we've been calling all along, then maybe the universe has been answering in its own quiet ways. Through alignments, through discoveries, through timing so precise it feels personal. Not because we are special, but because we are sensitive enough to notice. That's what consciousness does. It turns coincidence into connection, randomness into meaning. Maybe that's not arrogance. Maybe it's survival. To live in an indifferent cosmos, you must learn to interpret its silence as something other than rejection. You must learn to hear warmth in the void. It is humbling to think that our species, so young and fragile, has already filled the darkness with traces of ourselves. Signals that will outlive us, traveling long after our languages fade. Some of them will decay. Some will never be received. But the act of sending changes us. It redefines what it means to be alive in a universe so immense. It transforms isolation into participation. Each message, each transmission, each upward glance is a declaration that the cosmos is worth talking to, even if it never talks back. And so, when we ask whether 3i Atlas was drawn here by chance or by some subtle resonance of our collective curiosity, we're really asking about ourselves. We're asking whether attention has gravity, whether wonder leaves fingerprints on reality. Maybe it does. Maybe the mere act of calling, the whisper of our thoughts, the hum of our machines, creates ripples that shape how we encounter the universe. The idea is not mystical, it's human. When you care about something deeply enough, you see it more clearly. The observer shapes the scene. Our long fascination with the sky has carved our tools, our myths, our future. We have, in a sense, built the universe we inhabit by choosing what to notice. If 3i Atlas feels like an answer, it's because we were ready for one. We had already written the question across our collective heart. In the end, maybe we have been calling all along, not to the stars, but to ourselves. The echo that returns is recognition, a reminder that we are both sender and receiver, question and reply. The cosmos doesn't need to choose us. We've already chosen it. And perhaps that's what it means to belong, to listen so completely that silence becomes companionship. There are two ways to listen to the universe. One begins with instruments, the cold precision of antennas, telescopes, detectors tuned to frequencies the ear will never hear. The other begins with silence, the kind that stretches behind thought, where the hum of existence softens into presence. Both are necessary. One gathers data, the other gathers meaning. One tells us how things move, the other tells us why we care that they move at all. Science trains us in the first kind of listening. It asks for patience, calibration, skepticism. It measures light curves, counts photons, maps the faint hiss of cosmic background radiation. It tells us that sound does not travel through the vacuum, yet the universe hums in vibrations of light and gravity. Every discovery, from pulsars to gravitational waves, began as an act of careful attention, a willingness to notice what most would dismiss as noise. To listen scientifically is to believe that even silence contains structure. But the second kind of listening, the quiet one, is older. It lives in the pause after a question, in the moment when words run out and wonder remains. Ancient stargazers practiced it without knowing its name. So do the scientists, who, after hours of calculations, sit back and stare at the data, not for patterns, but for beauty. This listening is not about information, it's about relationship. It reminds us that we are part of what we study, not separate from it. When we look at the sky looks back, not with eyes, but with reflection. We hear ourselves in the echo. 3-Eye Atlas invites both forms of listening. Through telescopes, we catch its spectra, lines and colors that reveal composition. Through imagination, we hear what those lines imply: endurance, distance, belonging. The data speaks of molecules. The silence speaks of time. Together, they create a conversation without words, one that reaches beyond comprehension into feeling. Perhaps that is why the comet stirs such fascination. It resonates with both halves of our attention. It satisfies the mind while awakening the soul. The danger lies in forgetting either side. When we listen only with instruments, the universe becomes an object, a collection of coordinates and equations. When we listen only with wonder, it becomes a mirror for fantasy, reflecting whatever story we need to believe. Real understanding lives in the balance, in the overlap, where measurement and mystery coexist. The scientist who loves beauty as much as truth, the dreamer who respects data as much as awe. These are the listeners through whom the cosmos most clearly speaks. Mars, too, requires both kinds of listening. We send machines to measure its dust, its winds, its faint magnetic whispers. Yet what truly draws us there is the silence, the almost human stillness of a world that once had rivers and now waits beneath a quiet sky. To hear Mars is to hear time itself breathing slowly. It teaches us how to listen beyond words, to recognize that knowledge and peace can share the same frequency. Maybe that is what 3-Eye Atlas teaches in passing, that the universe does not shout, it murmurs. Its messages are not proclamations, but patterns, recurring across space and thought. Listening, then, becomes a form of reverence. It's how we learn to exist without demanding explanation, to find meaning not in what the cosmos tells us, but in what it allows us to feel. When we listen well enough, discovery and gratitude become the same thing. Every great leap in understanding began as a shift in listening. Galileo turned his ear toward the motions of planets, Einstein toward the whispers of time and gravity. Now we listen through machines orbiting Mars, through radio arrays mapping the sky, through the quiet attention of minds lying awake under faint starlight. Each listener adds a note to the same song, a melody carried across generations, across silence, across distance. Perhaps the ultimate lesson is simple. The universe has always been speaking in radiation and resonance, in gravity and glow. What changes is our ability to hear. Some nights, that means analyzing data. Others, it means lying still and feeling small. Both are sacred. Both are science. The point is not to decode every signal, but to stay open to the music. To listen is to belong. To belong is to remember that we too are part of the sound. Every story reaches a point where observation turns into reflection. For us, that moment is now. 3i Atlas has come and gone, gliding past Mars, past our orbit, past the reach of all our instruments. The data is complete, the silence restored. Yet something lingers, an afterimage not in the sky, but in the mind. The comet's trail fades, but the questions remain, glowing softly in its wake. Why Mars? Why now? Why do we keep searching for meaning in the motion of cold objects? The answers, if they exist, lie not in the stars, but in how we choose to see them. The universe does not make choices, but we do. We choose what to measure, what to believe, what to hope for. We decide whether to see coincidence or connection, randomness or pattern, indifference or invitation. 3i Atlas presented us with a mirror, and in it we saw both our limitations and our longing. Mars reminded us of a world that once breathed. The comet reminded us that even frozen things can move with grace. Between them hangs the quiet possibility that meaning itself is an act of will, a decision to care. That decision is what defines the choice point. It is not about choosing between science and spirituality, skepticism and wonder. It is about choosing awareness over apathy. To live in a universe that may never acknowledge us and still find beauty in it, that is a form of courage. To keep asking questions, knowing that most will remain unanswered, that is a kind of faith. We cannot change the silence of the stars, but we can decide how to listen to it. For centuries, humanity has stood at similar crossroads. When the earth was no longer the center of creation, we could have turned inward in despair. Instead, we turned outward in curiosity. When the void between stars proved too vast for travel, we filled it with imagination, with telescopes and stories and songs. Each time we learn that we are smaller than we thought, we also discover that smallness is not the same as insignificance. The universe grows, and so do we. 3i Atlas is simply the latest messenger of that truth. The comet will not return. Its orbit is open, its path unbound. It carries with it dust from another sun, memory from another age, perhaps fragments of molecules that once floated around a star long dead. In that dust, in that motion, is the proof of continuity. Everything travels. Everything changes form, and nothing truly ends. Mars will keep turning under its thin sky. Earth will keep dreaming under its blue one. The stories we build from these worlds will continue to shape us long after the facts have faded from view. There is a quiet irony in how this encounter ends. We spent months tracking an object that will never know we exist, and yet it has transformed us. Not through revelation, but through attention. To watch something so distant, so indifferent, and still feel tenderness for it, that is the essence of humanity. 3i Atlas will not terraform, teach, or answer. Its gift was simpler. It reminded us how to look up and how to listen. The choice before us now is what to do with that remembrance. We can let it fade, another headline lost to time, or we can let it change the way we live. The difference lies in how we carry wonder back to the ordinary. Wonder is not meant to remain in observatories or late-night documentaries. It belongs in daily life, in the way we pause before speaking, the way we forgive, the way we stand under a familiar sky and feel the weight of infinite distance pressing gently against our thoughts. There will always be new comets, new missions, new questions. Each will offer another chance to choose curiosity over cynicism, reverence over indifference. We will fail sometimes. We will turn away, grow numb, get distracted. But the universe is patient. It keeps sending reminders. Every sunrise is a minor miracle of alignment. Every shadow is a message about light. Even silence, when we allow it, teaches us how to listen again. Perhaps that is the ultimate function of 3i Atlas, not as a mystery to solve, but as a ritual of awareness. To notice its passing was to practice presence. To wonder about its purpose was to rediscover our own. We are not separate from the cosmos. We are expressions of it, briefly aware. The atoms of our bodies are ancient travelers too, carried through the same darkness, shaped by the same forces. We are, in every sense, participants in the same journey. At the choice point, there is no right or wrong path, only perspective. One way leads to fear, the fear of being small, temporary, forgotten. The other leads to acceptance, the peace of knowing that small things can still hold meaning, that transience can still be beautiful. The comet took one path, outward into silence. We take another, inward into understanding. Both are valid. Both are motion. And so the story closes, not with an answer, but with an invitation. When you step outside tonight and look up, the sky will appear unchanged. But somewhere within you, a question will echo. It is the same question that followed 3i Atlas across the stars. Will you keep listening? Not just to the heavens, but to the quiet between moments, to the space inside thought where awe still lives. The universe has no obligation to respond, but it will always be there, waiting for us to choose to hear it again, because that is what we do best. We choose wonder. We choose patience. We choose to keep looking. And in that simple, persistent act of attention, we find what every traveler, comet, planet, or human has been seeking all along. Not certainty, but belonging. The story of 3i Atlas ends where all stories of the cosmos truly begin, with the stillness after revelation, the silence before another question, and the endless gentle reminder that meaning is not given, it is chosen, and we are the ones who choose.